Good morning. My name is Greg McQuade with CBS 6. I hope this finds you healthy and smiling on this Memorial Day. I wish we could be together in person. I was honored when Mr. Thomas Blackwell invited me to speak to you today about what Memorial Day means to this journalist. Every Thursday for more than 6 years, I've been producing a segment called Heroes Among Us for WTVR. More often than not, I shine the light on a member of the armed forces or a veteran, and sometimes I feature the person in uniform who sacrificed their life for our nation. Sailors like Andrew Schmitz from Richmond, who on March 5th of this year returned home after being away for nearly 80 years. Andrew was killed on a date that will live in infamy. Andrew lost his life at Pearl Harbor when his ship, the USS Oklahoma, sank after Japanese torpedoes slammed into the ship's side. Andrew, along with 428 other sailors, went down with the ship. His remains were finally identified through DNA. I was humbled when the sailor's family invited me to his small homecoming service at Bliley's funeral home. I was standing a few feet away when Andrew's flag-draped casket was carried into the funeral home. Tears flowed down our cheeks. Tears of sadness for what could have been, and tears of joy knowing Andrew Schmitz was finally home. While it is safe to say that many Americans have heard about December 7th, 1941, many people would not know the significance of May 22nd, 1968. Last Friday marked the 52nd anniversary of the USS Scorpion disaster. I produced a story on the Scorpion. The Norfolk-based nuclear-powered submarine was on its way back to Virginia when it sank to the bottom of the Atlantic near the Azores. 99 sailors were serving on board, including Joseph Barr from Henrico County. His remains, along with his fellow sailors, were never recovered. They rest at the bottom of the Atlantic. Joseph Barr's sister agreed to speak with us for our story. Through her tears, she said she appreciated that her baby brother, whom she called Bubba, would not be forgotten. These are just two of the stories I've had the privilege to share with our CBS 6 viewers recently. Their sacrifices should always be remembered. Now, last November, I embarked on a transatlantic journey. This was not a business trip where I was producing a multi-part documentary for CBS 6. This was a sort of personal trip of discovery. My late grandfather, Captain William McQuade, served as commander of A Company of the 692nd Tank Destroyer Battalion during World War II. Unfortunately, I never had the pleasure of meeting him. He passed away in 1961, 8 years before I was born. While attending the 692nd's reunions across the nation, I got to meet the aging warriors who served with my late grandfather. By doing so, a sharper image of Captain McQuade came into focus. But I always yearned to know more, which brings us to last November. My girlfriend Melissa and I would travel to the battlefields where the 692nd Tank Destroyer Battalion fought to liberate and capture cities held by the enemy. During our 12-day journey across the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, I would put my hands into the frigid waters of the Roer River, the same waterway the unit would cross in February of 1945. I would stand in front of the towering spires of the Cologne Cathedral, almost on the exact spot where my grandfather and his fellow commanders stood to take a grainy black and white picture on March 9th of 1945. I would also walk the grounds of the concentration camp at Dachau. Members of the 692nd helped liberate it on April 29th, 1945. Several of the veterans I interviewed over the years wept when recounting what they witnessed there. Most of the 692nd's brave men would survive and make it back to the States at the end of the war. More than a few would die in battle and would be buried at different cemeteries across Central Europe, including Henri Chapelle American Cemetery in Belgium. Close to 8,000 American soldiers are buried at Henri Chapelle, their final resting place marked by stone crosses, many of them. The raw, misty day we arrived there was not a soul around. We went specifically to visit 4 soldiers, James DiLorenzo, Henry Smith, John Strack, and Dominic Radis. I wept at their final resting places, wondering if anyone had ever visited them over the years and thinking they never had a chance to come home and have families of their own. As the day grew to a close, the cemetery silent, the mist a little thicker. Taps was played at 5 o'clock sharp, just like it is played every single day. One of the most memorable stops during this pilgrimage happened in the small village of Dorf, Germany, right near Stolberg. A crossroads, really, that was dominated by an ancient stone church. It was here, in a field, that on November 11th, 1944, a young lieutenant with Company A, Gregory Dahlman, was digging in a tank destroyer when he was killed by a German shell. He was killed instantly. Dahlman's death devastated the men of A Company. The 24-year-old had a face of a Boy Scout and was beloved by his fellow soldiers. Gregory Dahlman was killed on November 11, 1944, and at the same time it was known as Armistice Day. Today, of course, it's known as Veterans Day. In the spring of 2016, I received copies of 2 handwritten letters from November of 1944 and January of 1945. They were penned by Gregory's commanding officer, who sent condolences and answers to Dahlman's crushed parents in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Quote, "His soldierly qualities were superior, and he was regarded as the best company executive officer in this battalion. I know that no matter what I can say, it is little avail in your hour of trial. But I do want you to know that his passing is a great personal loss to me, as well as an irreplaceable professional loss. I always regarded him as a younger brother and learned to know you people through his constant talk and admiration of his family life. He reflected great credit on his home life and religious training. He was a gentleman and a soldier." The saddened author continues, quote, "This has been a most difficult letter to write, for it all seems so unreal that Greg is gone. I never thought that the company would get along without him, and even now I know he must be on the Blessed Mother's favorite list. For certain, someone is taking excellent care of the company," end quote. These words were written by my grandfather, Captain William T. McQuade, who was commanding officer of A Company at the time. 3 years ago, I had the pleasure of holding these original letters at the 692nd's reunion in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The pristine, handwritten letters are in the care of Gregory Dahlman's nephew, Jim Kern. Now, it's difficult to put into words what it meant to hold these very letters my grandfather used to deliver the painful details of Gregory Dahlman's death. Did he struggle for those words? What was my grandfather thinking as he wrote the letters? I possess a couple of artifacts that belong to my grandfather. One heirloom is a metal dog tag that my grandfather was wearing during the war. I presume he was wearing it when he wrote these heartfelt letters on the battlefield. I carried his dog tag with me during our journey across the battlefields of World War II in Europe last November. Now, I often think of Gregory Dahlman, the smiling, confident soldier I only know from black and white photos. I've made a promise to myself, my grandfather, and Gregory Dahlman that someday soon I will travel to Wisconsin to visit Lieutenant Dahlman and his grave. That is really a story for another time. On this Memorial Day, I ask you to remember soldiers like Gregory Dahlman, James DiLorenzo, Henry Smith, John Strack, Dominic Radis, Joseph Barr, and Andrew Schmitz. There are 7 soldiers and sailors who shall remain forever young, who sacrificed so much for us all. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and healthy Memorial Day.